Okay, there we go. I think we're live. Hi everyone. This is Thomas Newman from Viva Financial Tuition, and I'm joining Kelly Davison today, who's your OCS course tutor. And okay, so I think we have people joining still. Welcome everyone. Very impressed with your dedication coming along on a Saturday morning. Rolling out of bed to me, Thomas. There's no That's it. And I think we've people joining from all over the world, so there'll be different time zones, obviously. So some of you might be afternoon or evening or very, very early in the morning, which is even more impressive. So welcome to today's session. This is the first in our OCS November 2021 course. This is a free session. There is a recording of this session, and the recording will be sent out afterwards. I'm going to talk about the full course now, and the other sessions in this course, which are only available for Viva students, Viva customers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to talk about that for about 5 minutes, and then I'm just going to hand over to Kelly, and Kelly's going to talk you through the first half of the pre-scene today. So at the hour mark, we'll take a 5-minute break. And then Kelly will come back and discuss the final part of today's session. And what we'll do is we'll have a Q&A at the end. We'll make time, 15 minutes or so at the end for all of your questions. There's a chat box there that you can make use of. And there's a Q&A box as well. So feel free to make use of those. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. So. Can you see that, Kelly? Yeah, great. Okay, so here's the overview of the course for November 2021. First of all, some of you may know Viva, some of you may not know Viva. We've basically been doing this for quite some time. So we've analyzed over the last 5 years about 50 pre-scenes. So we've gotten quite good at it. In that time, we've served almost 7,000 students. We've had all sorts of students. We've had prize-winning students. We've had students in very trying local circumstances. You know, we've had students that are struggling really to get through the OCS. So we've dealt with all sorts over the years. And our most recent classes have been very, very well received indeed. We've had an average rating of 4.7 out of 5 from our students. We are very much CIMA specialists, so we have been focused on CIMA since day one. That is our only qualification, and that is still the case. So a lot of tuition providers obviously have been moving online since the COVID situation. We were actually born online, and we're still obviously an online tuition provider. We always will be, and that has allowed us to keep a very lean organization and pass on savings to students in the form of much lower prices than other tuition providers. And very, very happy to say that in 2020, we were awarded the CIMA Global Pass Rate Excellence Award. That's a prestigious award given by CIMA to tuition providers who run courses that lead to higher than average pass rates for students. So we were one of only 6 tuition providers to receive that award. We joined a list that had Kaplan, BPP, HTFT, First Intuition, and Wisdom. So very, very proud of that. You know, I encourage you to go along and check out the course offerings from those other tuition providers. They're all very good. But I think what distinguishes Viva really is the lower price point. And we have certainly got the ambition to at least match the other tuition providers in terms of course quality. And we think that we may be exceeding their quality standards. So, as I said, this is the first session in the OCS for November 2021. There are 2 good options to unlock the rest of the course if you want to pay for a course. So we've got all access membership, and we've got the OCS Elite course. So I'm going to talk about the differences between those. With all access, you get access to everything at vivatuition.com for 365 days, okay? So you get access to this standard OCS course, but you also get access to the standard MCS and SCS courses and all of the objective tests. So that's E1, E2, E3, F1, F2, F3. P1, P2, P3. That's really useful because you can jump into any of those subjects and review theory. So for the OCS, for example, you can jump into E1, F1, and P1 courses if you want to review some theoretical point. You get access to 7 live webinars. So today is the first webinar, and I'll talk about the others in a minute. And you get 3 mock exams based on this pre-seen with no marking included, okay? You do get model solutions, but no marking included. So that's the all access option. The OCS Elite course is a more comprehensive course, and it's focused just on the OCS. So what it includes is you also get all access, but just for 90 days, okay? That's only 90 days. You get the 7 live webinars as you do with the all access membership. You get 3 mock exams for the OCS as you do with all access. The difference, however, is with the OCS Elite course, you get marking included, okay? So someone will be marking each of your scripts. With the OCS Elite course, you also unlock access to 6 2-hour live workshop sessions with Kelly, very exam-focused sessions. You get weekly office hour calls with Kelly, and you get a pass guarantee. That means that if you fail in November, you can repeat this OCS Elite course in February free of charge. Okay, so very, very comprehensive course. We benchmarked it very carefully against other tuition providers. We believe it's the most comprehensive OCS course in the tuition market. So, you know, both very good options, and I'll talk a little bit about the details of each one in a minute. They're both very good options. So if you're a student that is interested in progressing quickly through the qualification, and you want to go straight from the OCS into E2, F2, P2 and into the MCS and possibly into the strategic level in the next year, then all access is a great option, and you'll get a lot of good content with that. If you're a student that really just wants to focus on the OCS at the moment, and you're not quite sure if you're going to make it through or not, you're a little bit worried about failing maybe, and you want a very, very detailed course, maybe the OCS Elite course then is a good option for you. So let's have a look then at what's included in both the All Access membership and the Elite course, okay? You unlock 7 live webinar sessions. As I said, the first one is today. That's a free session. The first half of the pre-seen analysis. So Kelly will walk you through the first half of the pre-seen, page by page, section by section, talking about the most likely exam issues and relating some key theories to what she finds in the first half of the document. Tomorrow then, we've got the industry overview, a look at the real life industry. And that, as I said, from tomorrow onwards, you need to be a Viva customer to unlock access to these sessions. Then you've got on Monday, the second half of the pre-seen. So that's a page by page review of the second half of the document. Then you have a little bit of a break and we come back to E1, F1 and P1 applied sessions. So this is where we take the most important theories from E1, F1 and P1 and we apply them to the pre-seen. So very, very practical sessions. There'll be one for E1, one for F1 and one for P1. And then we tie things up with the key issues. That is a look at the 10 most important topics that you would have reviewed through all of the previous sessions. And we kind of summarize the most important topics in that final session. Okay, so that's all access and the Elite course. They unlock these 7 live webinar sessions. These are all recorded. They're all put up at vivatuition.com after each session takes place. With the all access and the Elite course, you also unlock membership at vivatuition.com. So with the all access pack, you get 365 days. With the Elite course, you get about 90 days. So you unlock membership for the duration of this OCS course with the Elite course. So you get access to theory reviews, E1, F1 and P1 video reviews. There is a series of videos on how to approach the case, understanding your role as a finance officer, how to use the pre-seen, how to apply theory, etc. There is a series of videos on what to actually do on the day of the pre-seen. So you know what you're going to do on the day of the exam. What is the examiner looking for? How do you manage your time well? What writing skills are required, etc. As I said, you get 3 mock exams. They come with model solutions, and you get access to the E1, F1, and P1 full course. It's very, very useful if you want to go back and review some specific theoretical point. So as I said, with all access, you unlock all of that for 365 days, and you can progress to the next level once you finish the OCS. With the OCS Elite course, you unlock access to all of this content for about 90 days, okay? So once your exam takes place in November, your all access membership stops, okay? So the next steps, if you want all access membership, register for this free session, the first session of the course. You've done that, great. You would purchase all access membership, and we're going to run a discounted membership for the next 48 hours, okay? And I'll send you the link after this session. So usually it's priced at £299, and that unlocks access to about 1,000 hours of CIMA course content between videos, questions, mock exams, PDFs, BPP texts that are bundled into each course. So a lot of content. It's a very, very valuable offering. Usually it's $299. We'll do it for $229 for the next 48 hours, okay? And as soon as you join, you will receive links to register for the remaining webinar sessions. So the other 6 webinar sessions, you will immediately receive access to those when you purchase all access. Okay, so that's all access. If you have any doubts, send an email to info@vivatuition.com. info@vivatuition.com. So with the Elite course, you unlock access to the remaining elements of the course. So there are live workshop sessions that Kelly does, 6 of those, they're 2 hours each, very exam focused, okay? So you'll start with a detailed overview of the exam, what the marking process is. So if you understand what the examiner is looking for and how they mark, you know, what they reward and what they, you know, what they punish, then you will have a very, very, very good start. Then you look at how to apply theory, how to generate ideas for your answers, and how to manage your time and to put your answers together, and recognizing, crucially, what a good answer looks like, what a bad answer looks like. We'll provide examples of both and why they're good, why they're bad. And then there are sessions on exam style and some final recommendations. So very, very practical sessions. Again, these are all recorded, and you'll have access to all of the recordings after the sessions. And then we have more informal ways to interact with your tutor. And we have these office hour sessions. You can pop in every week to a call with Kelly, where you can discuss doubts, concerns, theoretical issues, anything basically related to the OCS, and Kelly will help you out with that. And there are weekly calls with Kelly for that. And you also have access to a private Slack group. So this is where the Elite course students hang out basically for the duration of the course with their tutor. So you'll find there's daily interaction here. Students can raise very, very good questions that we never thought of. So while the webinar sessions, the workshops, the office hours covers a lot of content, and the mock exams too, you know that you can't cover absolutely 100% of the possible issues that could come up on the day of the exam. So what we find is that the private Slack group is really, really good for students raising things that we perhaps missed. And it's a great way to learn from your fellow students. And of course, it's a great way to learn from your tutor. So very, very interactive group there. Okay, so we think it's a winning formula basically. So we benchmark this course very carefully against other OCS courses. The fact that you have a coach that's taking you through all of the webinar sessions and workshops and office hours, the private interactive group, etc., means you have a coach, okay, who's taking you through this course step by step. You have 22 hours of classes, which is more than enough. You get access to all of that on-demand content, that library of content at vivatuition.com, 1,000 hours of content. So you'd unlock access to that for 90 days. And you get 3 mock exams with marking, with model solutions. And I will say that I think these are the best mock exams that we've ever put together. We've got a team that does those. And I've been very, very impressed basically with what they've come up with. They're very, very in-depth mock exams. They're quite tricky, but that's, you know, intentionally the case. And the student community, as I said, private Slack group, really great way to learn from your students and to keep up interaction with Kelly throughout the week. Okay, so the next steps, if you want to join the Elite course, you can book your place by paying a £99 deposit. So the price for this course is typically £699, okay? As I said, we benchmark that course carefully against other tuition providers. What we see for this kind of course with this level of support typically costs in excess of £1,000. Very often it runs for £1,200, £1,300. So £699 for this course. What we're going to do for the next 48 hours is we're going to offer the course for £599, and we'll hold that price for the next 48 hours. So if you book your place by paying the £99 deposit, and I'll include a link to do that soon, then there will be £500 left to pay on the course. The other thing worth mentioning is that you can pay the balance on your course over 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, or 6 months. So you've up to 6 months to pay it. So if you want to pay over 6 months, that means you can spread that balance of £500 in the course over the next 6 months. So that's quite useful. Just one more thing, if you are already actually an All Access member, you get a further discount. So if you already have an All Access membership with Viva, the course is actually $499, okay? So you would pay your £99 deposit and you'd have £400 left to pay. So if you're an All Access member already, pay the deposit of £99, you have £400 left to pay. And if you're not an All Access member and you want to book this course, if you do it in the next 48 hours, then you pay the £99 deposit and you would have £500 left to pay, okay? So as soon as you pay that £99 deposit, Viva will give you All Access membership for 90 days. You'll unlock all of the content at vivatuition.com, and we will email you the remaining webinar links, the webinar sessions. We'll email the workshop links to register, and we will email the Slack group membership, the link to join that Slack group. We'll also email you a terms and conditions sheet that you need to sign before you take the course. So some basic things, agreeing to actually show up to the workshops and live webinars and to actually sit the mock exams. Okay, so there are your two options for the OCS if you're interested in purchasing a course. They're both great options. If you have any doubts, please email us at info@vivatuition.com. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Kelly, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop some links into the chat box for the different course options. And I'll also send an email after this session with some of those details, okay? So I'm going to stop sharing, and I think you're already the host, Kelly, right?
Yes, yeah, I think I am, Thomas. Thank you.
Great. So what I'll do is I'm gonna shut up, and I'm gonna stop my video, and I'm gonna hand over to Kelly. I'll hang around for a few minutes, Kelly, just to ensure that everything looks good at your end, and I'll shout if there's anything that looks funny.
That's great. Thank you ever so much, Thomas. Right then, guys, good morning, everybody. I hope I find you all safe and well on this Saturday morning, as it is in the UK currently. Just to reiterate what Thomas said previously, obviously today's session is an opportunity for us to really start getting a feel for what's included in this time around's operational case study. Hot off the press as well, because the operational case study pre-seen materials were only released yesterday. So you may or may not have had the opportunity to actually have a look at some of that content, but hopefully I'm here to actually help with that and give you a bit more insight into the areas that we really feel are key areas in relation to this particular case. Now, as Thomas said previously, as I'm going through this, I'm going to mute the notifications. However, that doesn't mean that you can't still use the chat panel, and use that chat panel in there to ask any questions. And I will try and address all of those questions at the end of today's session. Now, the whole idea behind today then is so that I can go through and share with you really my experience of operational case study, the experience, and also thinking about the expertise that we can share with you, just because of the insight that we've had for the number of years that we've actually been delivering this. So I'm hoping that today you'll take something away from this. As I said, this is one of two sessions in reference to the pre-seen material. Obviously, this is the sort of free session. And if you enjoy the session, obviously you've got all of the links there from Thomas so that you can actually access the other areas. Okay then guys, so I'm just going to share my screen now with you, and what you should find on the screen, and again, if you can let me know, Thomas, that would be fantastic. You should actually see on the screen there that you've got an example of the pre-seen there. So if you can just confirm that for me, Thomas, that would be fantastic.
Yep, I can see it, Kelly.
Fabulous, thank you ever so much. Okay, so as I said, at the moment, I'm going to hide the notifications that are coming through, just so that we can refer to those later on. Okay then, chaps, so this, as I said, could well be the first time that you've actually seen this particular case, and the case study this time around is Tread Cushy, and Tread Cushy is based around an organisation which, as you can probably tell from the picture there on the screen, is an organisation that manufactures themselves and also sells direct to market a number of different types of sneakers. Okay, now one of the key things then with reference to this particular organisation is that they are very, very interested in the impact on sustainability, using a lot of recycled materials, using lots of materials from sustainable sources. So that seems to be their USP in here. So there's a lot of emphasis on those areas as we're going through. So yeah, so we've got Tread Cushy then, as I said, a manufacturing organisation, but also an organisation who sells direct to market as well. And they've got quite a few different channels in the way that they sell to market, namely online. They've also got an app as well, and they've also got some retail units as well, which is maybe an area that they might be looking to expand in that sense. Now, you may or may not have seen some of the pre-seen previously, and I hope this is no shock to anybody, but what you've got in here is you've got 26 pages of pre-seen material. Now, for the exam, you will get access to the pre-seen in the actual exam. However, we want to make sure that you're absolutely all over this pre-seen before you actually get into the exam. So, you know, one thing you've got to promise me from the get-go here is that you're going to immerse yourself in this pre-seen and try thinking about this as an organisation that you are actively involved in. Maybe it's an organisation that you work for. Now, what you'll probably notice as we're going through this is that this does reflect the real world, and there is method in the madness there. You know, we want to make sure, or that SEMA wants to make sure that you're in a position where you are getting that commercial acumen and you're able to actually present that commercial or commerciality when it comes to this particular case. Okay, so you've got all of your content there. There's a lot going on. You've got the background, you've got your role, you've got a bit about the industry, you've got a bit of financials in there. You've got some articles, which are independent articles, just so that you can get a really good feel for this organisation. So my intention, time allowing, is that we'll work through approximately half of this today. And I do tend to work through it on a line-by-line basis, but what you'll find is that we've incorporated in here some key sort of pointers. One of the things I think you've got to do from the get-go is you've really got to start thinking about how this information that you're given can translate into an exam question. Okay, and that's what you've got to think in here. Or to put it more appropriately, a task. You know, these are not just questions and answers that we've got here. These are tasks that you're being asked to perform. So you've got to think about how that will translate into these tasks. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and drip feed in some ideas of areas that we think, those are key areas let's get into the mind of the examiner in here. Let's pull out the ideas that the examiner had in their mind when they were writing this case study. Okay, so as I said, Q&A at the end of today's session, and as we're going through, just still use the chat panel, and then I can always refer to it later on. So if you've got a burning question, stick it on there and I'll come back to it in due course. Okay then, so let's set the scene then. So who are you then? So you are a finance officer in this organisation. Now, again, this is where you've got to be a bit careful about making sure that you are pitching this at the right level. So with a finance officer, you are in a position where you are assisting in the decision-making process. Now, your role itself that you're currently in may actually be more senior than this, because of the fact that you've maybe delayed your studies. You may well be in a situation where you're not yet a finance officer in the role that you're in. You've got to make sure you pitch it right, pitching it at the right level. So here, guys, you might have a very strategic job at the moment, and for whatever reason, you've started your studies a little bit later. We need to draw that back in. We're not looking at strategy yet. We're not looking at, what the 10-year plan is for this organisation. What we're looking at is assisting in the short-term decisions. Now, as you can see there on the screen, what's going to be your role? Short-term focus, looking at things like costings and the different types of costing techniques that an organisation can use. So helping to support things like activity-based costing, dealing with different types of budgets, dealing with variance analysis in here. Now, one of the biggies, and if you take anything away from this today for me, it's digital costing as well. Digital costing, they love it in this exam. So do please make sure that you are comfortable with what we mean by digital costing, but more importantly, the types of costs that would be incorporated in there as well. Okay, so short-term focus, different types of costing, different types of budgets, variances, love variance analysis. So variances will be an area that you might need to focus on, possibly the more advanced variances. So dealing with material mix and yield, or dealing with sales mix and volume in there. Those might be the more advanced elements and operational and planning variances, but they should be in there in some way, shape or form. You're going to be responsible for things like working capital management, what's happening to inventories, what's happening to receivables, what's happening with your payables during the period. So working capital, but again, remember, short-term working capital. We're not looking at how we're going to finance, research and development projects, which are going to take the next 5 years. That's not our focus. Our focus is short-term. Okay, so let's keep that in our mind's eye as we go through. So a lot of that is obviously based around cash management, and that is sort of the role that you need to take on. Okay, now, one of the key things to note in here, and again, I've flagged this up, and it's in relation to E1 actually, and what you've got to remember is that you are training towards becoming a CIMA qualified accountant. You've got to adhere to the CIMA Code of Ethics. Why wouldn't you, in the scheme of things? So anything that you suggest or anything that you analyze needs to make sure that it's in line with the CIMA Code of Ethics, and you must make sure that you're comfortable with that. So thinking about integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality and professional behavior. So making sure that you're comfortable with the Code of Ethics, and always thinking, if we make this particular decision, or if I go down this particular route, is it in line with that Code of Ethics? Okay, so that's you as a finance officer. That is your role. Your role is at the organisation tread crushing, as I mentioned to you previously. Now, what you've got to think here is that the pre-seen itself is not enough. I also want you thinking about the industry as well. Now, a very, very close comparative in terms of the type of organisation here would be Allbirds. And Allbirds produce sneakers. which are made from sustainable sources. They've got the same sort of market in there. That's not the only one, guys, and it would be really good, I think, for you to go away from today and actually do a bit more research in terms of, you know, what's happening with that industry and having a look at different types of organisations that operate in that particular realm. Okay, so your role, as we said, short-term focus, you're going to be involved in the day-to-day activities in that sense, and you're going to provide management accounting information. One thing to just bear in mind, however, you will also be drafted in at certain points in time to help with the support of the preparation of the financial statements as well. So in that sense, there's no getting away from it. You've got to be really quite careful with your F1 content as well. So there are certain accounting standards, guys, that you really need to have a lot of insight into. And we will find those. We will see those as we're going through in terms of those accounting standards. Okay, so let me move on then, and let's now start digging down into this a little bit further. Okay then, so first things first then, the company itself. So as I mentioned to you previously, Tread Cushy is a company that designs, manufactures and sells a range of these athletic shoes. Okay, so these sneakers that they sell. They're made from recycled and natural materials. Okay, now that in itself, fabulous from a sustainability perspective. But what you've got to think to yourself is a bit more expensive. Okay, so we're looking at a different type of market in here. You know, these are going to be more expensive to produce and make, and they're going to therefore be probably a little bit more expensive when we actually sell them. So again, just thinking about that as we go through. Where are we based? We're based in Keyland. Keyland is in mainland Europe, and we use the K dollar as our currency. You'll see at the very top of the page there then, they're based in Europe. There is good and bad with reference to that. The pros are pretty good infrastructure in place, skilled workforces, local consumers will have high purchasing power in that situation. But the cons are that it's expensive. It's going to be expensive to operate from a production facility perspective, but also just in terms of general infrastructure as well. The other thing is there's going to be a lot of red tape. There's going to be a lot of regulation that we need to adhere to. The other thing I think when I look at this as well is that they're based in Keyland, but what opportunities do we have to maybe move outside of mainland Europe? So that's also something I'm thinking about in here in terms of expansion. Now, the business itself is pretty well established in here. You know, it was founded in 2007. You know, it's about 15 years old now. And the two founders of this organisation did previously, so prior to 2007, they actually worked for a major worldwide athletic shoe and clothing brand. And again, you're thinking of your Nikes, your or Nike, I should say, or Adidas of the world, sort of springs to mind in there. They still work for Tread Cushy in here. They're still really passionate about the environment, passionate about sustainability and the use of natural materials. Now, again, thinking E1, corporate and social responsibility, giving something back, being a good corporate citizen in here. You know, their focus is the fact that they want to make sure that this is something that they are continually promoting as part of their business. That's why they set this up ultimately, because they were really concerned. They were really concerned about the environmental impact that the organisation that they previously worked for was actually happening or was actually having. One thing I would just say, and this is just something to be mindful of in here, this is what they pride themselves on, you know, sustainability, natural materials, recycled materials. Just be careful with this, because I do recall from previous case studies that there has been situations where things have still gone wrong. where an organisation has been of the opinion that they have been purchasing materials, for example, from sustainable sources, when actually that wasn't the case, when they actually dug down and did some due diligence. So yeah, this is great, absolutely fantastic. But there could be things that go wrong with reference to that. And we need to think about how Treadcushy might be able to deal with that as and when it comes to fruition. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but it's something to just always be mindful of, because that's their USP. And if something goes wrong from that perspective, your consumers are not going to be happy. Okay, so what did they do then? They were unhappy with the situation. They set up Treadcushy in 2007. They set it up in a very small workshop. They have worked closely with their suppliers. They've obviously got really good relationships in there. And they have developed from 2007 and launched in 2010 their first fair shoes, and the fair shoes that they had and entirely from natural materials. What was included in here? Wool, natural rubber, sugarcane, castor beans were included. They were launched in 2010 and they launched it through their own website. Quite forward thinking actually in 2010. So it essentially is very much online. First year of launch, pretty decent. They sold 25,000 pairs of these shoes. So, strong sales from the get-go here proves to me that this is a really promising concept. And, we would like to think that it's only going to go in one direction. They also appear to be early adopters of this as well. It's not until the last few years where we've actually seen a very sort of high upward trajectory in these areas, because us as consumers are becoming more aware of the impact that we're having. So actually very, very early to market in here, pretty decent sales in the first year and through the website. Now, what you've got to think, using your website, lots of data analytics in there as well. Yeah, lots of big data that we can take advantage of. And we often do see big data and dysfunctional or disruptive technology, a key area of the exam. Okay then, so what's happened then? So we've decided to keep everything in-house. We've kept our production in-house so that we can control everything, control the sustainability, the manufacturing process, and the craftsmanship as well. Whenever you see things like that, think expensive, because obviously this is what they're priding themselves on, the quality of the products that they sell. The other thing I would just say as well, they've kept it in-house because they like the control. So that could have a significant impact on things like short-term decision-making. For example, would this type of organisation outsource some of the functionality in here? As it stands at the moment, probably not, because of the fact that they like the control of that manufacturing process in there. So as I mentioned there, craftsmanship then is a factor when it comes to things like maybe relevant costing and make or buy decisions that the organisation might have to make going forward. Now, early on then in the sort of setup of this organisation, the company was funded then by venture capital finance and private investors. So it would appear, wouldn't it, that Treadcushy are not on any sort of stock market in here, and it would appear that they are a private limited company. What they've done then is they've actually invested quite a lot in their own production facility, their own distribution facility, and their own head office. Be mindful then, as I said to you before, about the accounting standards that could be relevant in here. That investment, think about IFRS 16, think about IAS 16. IFRS 16, non-current assets, what do you capitalise, what don't you capitalise, what is the subsequent accounting treatment? And secondly, think about IAS 16, which is your leases. Okay, so you must make sure that you are absolutely all over those two particular standards in there. Okay, now again, some of you it may have been some time since you did F1, so there has been some changes in those standards, so make sure you get up to speed, hopefully using the additional Viva resources that you might have access to. Okay, moving on then. Time has elapsed. We've gone from 2010, we're now in 2015. What we've now got is in 2015, we're launching a new range of athletic shoes with the uppers, just to confirm then, the part that actually covers the top of the foot there. They're made from fabric, which is derived from wood pulp in there. That in itself has actually then created another option for us as an organisation, and that does create these weather resistant properties. And that obviously, if you are, a runner, it can become increasingly important, particularly, here in the UK, in that sense. They launched these to market then in 2017, which gave them another alternative channel, because what they also did is they opened their first store as well. So they opened the first store in a capital city, or in the capital city of Keeland. Why is that good? Well, if you are selling direct to market in a store, remember that the consumer is not just buying the actual, shoes themselves. What the consumer is doing is buying the experience in here. So what you will tend to find is that your margins are better in that particular situation. So the impact on margins there, that is going to be brilliant for the organization, because the consumer is buying the experience and not just the shoe itself. So the ambience of the actual retail section needs to be appropriate. Now, with reference to this, then what you've got to think from an E1 perspective is that the marketing associated with this will be very different from the online marketing that you've got. With online marketing, remember, you've got a real opportunity in there to gather big data. You've got a real opportunity, to see things like bounce rates and click-throughs on your website. You don't have that opportunity as much through the actual retail store. So I want you to be thinking about ways in which they might be able to collect data from their consumers. No doubt you guys will, be dealing with the retail sector, and you have your sort of your loyalty cards, and you often get asked, can we take your email to send you a receipt and things like that. And again, you've got to think about whether Tread Cushy are also taking advantage of that as well. Okay, so we now move on to June 2021 and look at the revenue, look at the number of pairs of sneakers that we're selling there. 700,000 pairs. Remember, in our first year in 2010, it was only 25,000. So there has been some significant growth in that period, which undoubtedly will have been supported by the fact that you're going to have an increase in your production facility. They want to control it all themselves, so the production facility would have had to increase to ensure that we're in line with our demand. So we've got revenue of 68 million dollars, profit before tax 6 million, which is superb. They're now selling 700,000 pairs of these athletic shoes in 10 European countries now. And they've opened the 14th store. Looks pretty good in the scheme of things from where I'm looking. What they want then, and this is the sort of long-term aim here, is they want to sell by 2025 1 million pairs of these shoes. I cannot see, as it stands at the moment, why they wouldn't be able to do that. I think that's the key thing. It's definitely shifting in the right direction. The other thing, which is really nice to see as well, it's not just about increasing the revenue. It's not just about increasing their profit. Look, they want to be carbon neutral as well by 2030. Again, this just bolsters, doesn't it, the fact that they've got very strong corporate and social responsibility principles in here. And that is an undertone of everything that this organisation does. So again, I get the impression that this is what drives this organisation. This is what drives Tread Cushy. What you got to remember here, though, we're opening all these stores, we're increasing our production facilities, we're increasing our distribution networks in there. all of which is going to require investment. And again, what we've got to think about is how that's financed. So the acquisition of non-current assets, the acquisition through either acquisition through cash or lending, but also using right of use assets as well. So again, you can see again, IFRS 16, IAS 16, again, is going to be, increasingly important here. Okay. Right, so that's your background. That's who you are. That's what your role is. That's also what the background of the business is. Doing pretty well in the scheme of things. Seem to have a really good, unique selling point in their USP. What we've then got then is an extract from their website in here. Okay, so what's special about our athletic shoes in here then? Three main things. Now, this is the key point with this, because this comes from their website. This is essentially what they pride themselves on. Yeah, this is what they're all about as an organization. So these are fundamental principles for tread cushioning. So this is the undertone of everything that they do. Okay, first things first then. They are made from 100% natural or recycled materials. Well, we've said that all along, haven't we? That is what they pride themselves on. Sustainably sourced wool, sustainably sourced wood. You've got natural rubber, you've got natural sugarcane composites in there. You've got castor bean, you've got recycled plastic. And the list goes on. Sustainably sourced cotton thread, 100% recycled cardboard. I'm exhausted just thinking about the time, the effort that has gone into actually ensuring that that is the case. All fabulous. But again, think pound signs in here. This type of material is going to be expensive. And also, if we compare it to conventional sneakers, but also what you've got to consider is that I can imagine that quite a lot of this is going to have to be imported into Keyland. Now, they want to become carbon neutral by 2030, but it's highly likely, isn't it, that some of these natural resources are not going to be available in Central Europe. So we are going to have the issue, if you like, associated with getting the balance right between using sustainable sources from overseas, for example, fair trade sources, but also the impact that it has on actually, flying those materials into Keyland. So that's maybe a bit of a contentious issue actually for them that they're going to have to resolve. Second one then, they're made in their own production facility. We've already mentioned that as well. So they keep the production in-house. That's interesting. It's on their website, something they pride themselves in. I don't think they're going to be keen on outsourcing. That could be perceived as being a little bit risky, to be honest. So again, something to be mindful of. And notice as well that they use skilled craftspeople in here as well. A bit of an opportunity to shake things up, I can imagine there. And I've just made a point about P1 variances in here. What you could do is possibly change the mix of the staff that you're using in there and think about the implications of that. What would happen to our variances if we use lower skilled staff, for example? What would be the impact on the cost in reference to that? But more importantly, what would be the impact in terms of demand in there? So, some things to just start thinking about. That's all I'm doing here, is just dropping in a few ideas. Okay, now the other thing as well is they make everything in Keyland. The people of Keyland and the public are going to be happy about that, aren't they, if you think about it? So they are keeping it in their home country as such. So I think it's going to resonate very well, actually, with the general public there. I think the residents will be quite happy about that because they're giving something back to the economy. And then finally, I like this one, they're created with both comfort and style in mind. So basically, they pride themselves on the fact that they are designing, and just look at the picture, they are designing athletic shoes that are designed that are stylish, but they are the most comfortable pair of athletic shoes you are ever gonna own. That's a very, very strong value proposition in there, isn't it? If you think about it from Tread Cushing, and they say, you know, you're never going to want to go back to another athletic shoe brand ever. Okay, so what they're sort of priding themselves on, if you think about it, is brand loyalty. You know, you go to Tread Cushing and you're never going to find anybody else again. Yes, so again, that's something to just be mindful of. We cannot afford to damage that. Yeah, that's another thing. So we can't afford to damage that. You know, we've got this strong value proposition, but we need to make sure that that's maintained. It's a big, big statement, that I think you will agree. Okay, so where can we buy? Now, there is 3 different options in relation to Tread Cushing in terms of where we can get these from. You've got 3 options. First option then is you go to the retail stores themselves. Remember, retail stores will likely have better margins in there, and also probably more opportunity for upselling. From the perspective of the fact that you've got this service element in relation to that as well. So your consumer there is buying not only the shoe, but also buying the experience as well. You've got online stores in there as well. And you've also got a shopping app. Now, the shopping app, we'll see later on, is a relatively new addition in here, so relatively new addition. But with both of those, you've got a real opportunity in terms of big data analytics. You know, you're here with the opportunity of really collecting a lot of data, which means that, and again, it goes back to what we said before, you know, customers are never going to want to go back. You know, if they're buying from us online, we can then tailor quite a lot of our marketing that we do. We can go direct to our consumer and actually offer them what they want based upon their past buying activity in there. So big data for me and digital costing is huge in relation to operational case study. So you've got to make sure that you are absolutely all over it. And also think about disruptors as well, so disruptive technology. So how might they be able to use things like AI, for example? So thinking about chatbots, for example, that they could use on their online forums or on their apps there. So think about disruptors and whether or not they could take advantage of some of those as well. Retail stores, a bit of a different experience because it's the ambience of the buying. And again, there is other things that they could do, if you think about it, in retail stores that they can't do online. You know, quite a lot of organisations now that sell things like running shoes, they do have the opportunity for you to actually, you know, use some equipment in store so that you can actually see the shape of your foot, how you actually run, whether you need insoles or not. You know, so there is opportunity there, which means that you can actually, to some degree, charge a premium for that experience. So I'm sure we'll see that as we go through. Okay, what we then do is we go to one of those different outlets. We then choose either the casual range or the performance range. Casual range, these are comfortable, stylish athletic shoes in here, every day, yeah, day-to-day wear. Or you've got the performance range, which, as you can see there, is running performance. What we then got is we've got different options. So in the casual element, we've got wool uppers. Remember, that's the part covering the shoe, and you've got the wood uppers in there. Key thing to remember, key difference between the two, remember the wood uppers then, those are weatherproofed in that sense. So again, some sort of unique selling point with reference to those. You've then got the hill and flat, which is in relation to the performance range. Sorry, forgive me, I forgot the name then. So the performance range in there. Now, what you can see in here is that you've got wood again in those sense. Now across the board, okay, across the board in here, what you've got is many different colours, many different designs. You've got basic and regular designs. You've got the 5 colours in there in reference to the performance ones. That is screaming to me variance analysis. Yeah, screaming to me, you know, if we sold more of the flat than the hill, what would be the implications of that? If we sold more of the wood than the wool, what would be the implications of it? So for me, I'm thinking here, I'm thinking sales variances. I'm thinking different types of materials going into the production process. So think about material mix and yield, think about sales mix and quantity is what I would say. So your advanced variances. Oh, just on that point, actually, and just something to be aware of. This exam, you're not going to have to calculate things like your variances. Absolutely not. No, not at all. In this exam, your variances will be calculated for you. And you go, hurrah. But remember, in this exam, it's about interpretation. So you're going to have to interpret those variances. So I don't want you to think that you're going to have to go back and learn how to do all the calculations again. Absolutely not. But you need to know what the calculations mean to then allow you to be able to interpret the results. Okay, so interpretation is absolutely key with reference to these. So make sure that you've got the right hat on when you're thinking about variances. Right, let's have a look then at who's involved in this business. So you've got Sophie and Harry. Sophie and Harry then were the founders, if you remember rightly. Sophie's your MD, Harry is your product development and IT director. So he's got quite a lot of responsibility, has old Harry there. Sophia then, you know, what is she interested in? We already know her passion, don't we? We know her passion. Her passion then is to ensure that she reduces, or they reduce as a business, any harmful impact of the business on the environment. She's interested in looking at new designs. Now, with reference to that then, if we think about reducing the harmful impacts, it could mean that we need to have some sort of process re-engineering. We might need to have a look at the suppliers that we've got. We might need to tweak those elements because of the fact that she wants to continually reduce the harmful impact. Harry then, Harry, as we know, is the co-founder. He's looking at product development and design and that type of thing. He's also the IT director and is really interested in social media and the impact that that can have. Isn't everyone now, but social media impact, and has appointed a social media marketing manager. That's important. There is going to be something, in some way, shape or form, about how we can utilize social media from a big data perspective, probably, but also from a sort of tailored marketing perspective. What you also need to think about are the risks associated with social media and social media marketing as well, because we know that it doesn't always go well. Okay, so I think that's going to be increasingly important. So we need to be able to, as I've said, measure that risk. We need to deal with the uncertainty that is directly associated with that. Right, we've then got Oleg. Oleg is our production director. He's been with them for a long time, actually, since 2010. Interesting. He used to work for a garment manufacturing facility. He was the senior production manager there. Interesting, because there's not been any mention of it yet. But Tread Cushy could quite easily move into this market, couldn't they? You know, at the moment, it is just the athletic shoes that they've got, both from a casual and a performance perspective. But something that our consumers might demand or see it as a complementary product in there could be, you know, your leggings, your suits, you know, your garments that you use for sporting activities. So definitely an area of interest in terms of demand. Again, what you'll notice in here as well is both Sophia and Harry are really interested in looking at new designs for new products. And that's maybe where Oleg can actually come in. The other thing is really interested in is looking at continuous improvement as well, and looking at how they can improve working practices. One of the things I would say in there is that you might have an element of process re-engineering in there. So thinking about how we can improve the efficiency of our operations. So trying to be as efficient as possible. One thing that we do see a lot actually from a P1 perspective is limiting factors. So where you've got bottlenecks in the production process. So Oleg is going to be responsible for looking at how you can efficiently use those bottlenecks, you know, how you prioritize production, for example. We've then got Jack. Jack is sales and distribution. He's pretty new in the scheme of things, which is great because you get a little bit of new interest, you get new ideas in that sense. But also, you know, you've got to make sure that he understands the culture of this organisation. Is it very interested in the impact of IT on distribution, and is looking to embrace more technology. Again, I'm thinking there, logistics, yeah, you know, in terms of logistics in here, how can we use big data, you know, apps with maps, for example? How can we pack our distribution vehicles efficiently to ensure that we get to as many customers as we possibly can? You know, so I think that's really important in there. But again, you know, technology costs money. Again, there'll be investment in non-current assets, and possibly leases will need to be considered there as well. Now, Emily is going to be who you are part of. Well, you're going to be part of her team, aren't you, if you think about it? Emily's your FD in here. She's been there a while. She's been there since 2012, and she has been qualified for a number of different years as well. She was responsible for a lot of the securing of finance at the very beginning, at the get-go of the business. And she believes the business is now on a sound financial footing. Seems to be doing pretty well, this organisation. However, she now feels it's time to invest in new products and new markets. That needs funding, that needs working capital. New markets, I just draw your attention back to Oleg, garment manufacturing. I'm thinking that is probably what we're going to start thinking about in here as a bit of a complementary product. And remember, you're going to be part of Emily's team now. And then you've got Sarah. Sarah is your HR director. You know, she took this role in 2018 because of the reputation of Tread Cushy. They've got an excellent reputation of staff welfare. So it looks like they're a bit of a go-to employer as well. Again, go back to what I said to you before. You know, they pride themselves on the fact that they're actually in Keyland, and Keyland is where they do all the production, giving something back to the local economy, etc. Again, excellent reputation there. And this is how it's broken down. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but it's just important for you to really understand, you know, who sits where. Those names are going to be important to you because you might be asked in the exam to perform activities for these individuals. So you might be asked to undertake some analysis, for example, in relation to Tim there, who looks after the raw materials. He might be asking your insight into IS2 and how you value inventory. Head of maintenance might be interested to understand how you might be able to gain some efficiencies, or maybe look at activity-based costing in relation to maintenance. So, you know, this just gives you a bit of an overview of structure. And you've also got your sales and distribution in there as well. Interestingly, you don't have anybody who looks after just the app-based sales in there. There's no mention of it, just online and retail stores. But then here you are, this is where you fit in. So you've got Emily, we've just said, Emily provides the strategic direction. You've then got Ben. Ben is who you are probably going to report directly into. He's probably going to be the guy that keeps sending you emails in the actual exam. He's more concerned then with the midterm implementation of that long-term strategy. And then there's you. You are part of the finance team in there. You're one of 4 finance officers, and there is also 4 finance assistants in there as well. You might have to therefore support those less experienced individuals as well. Okay, right, now before we actually move on then and look at the other key information then regarding the operations of the company, I think what it is probably a good place there to just have a quick 5-minute break, because I appreciate that you've been listening to both myself and Thomas this morning. So what we'll do is we'll just have 5 minutes, if we can leave it there, and we will come back in 5 minutes time to review the remaining elements. So it's 10:33 UK time at the bottom of the screen there. So let's come back at 10:38. Cheers guys, I'll see you back in 5. Okay then guys, just a quick 5 minutes there just for you to have a bit of a comfort break and stretch your legs and get away from your screens for 5 minutes. So let's carry on. I just had a quick look through all of the questions there, and I think most of them were resolved by Thomas, so thank you for that. Okay then, so let's get into the detail then. So other information then about the company now. Now I completely appreciate here, guys, that there's probably going to be quite a lot to take in with reference to this area. So it's going to need you to obviously revisit this after today's session. You need to make sure that you're revisiting this pre-seen on a number of occasions. You can't just look through it once, because there's no doubt going to be things that you absolutely miss in here. Okay, so again, I do appreciate that some of this you may need to come back to. But sales and markets then. So what we've got then in here then, as you can see, is we know that we sell shoes, athletic shoes, sneakers to consumers. We sell them in Keyland, which is where our head office is, our production facility, and our distribution facility actually is. But we also sell in 9 other countries in Europe. So quite specifically, they are advising that it is European countries that we sell to, which no doubt makes the logistics of that quite straightforward. My thoughts are here, however, that I think there could quite easily be new markets that we possibly enter into in the exam. So we might look to expand from Europe, for example, into one of the other continents in here. So again, that's going to have its risks. The other thing then as well is that they've always had this policy of selling direct to the consumer. So as it stands at the moment, and I'm not sure whether this is something that you've noticed, but they're not actually selling their products through intermediaries in here. So you're not going to see any of the tread cushy athletic shoes in your sort of standard retail stores on the high street in there. You're only going to see them in tread cushy stores, bit of a mouthful. Now that's fine, because you've got that as a bit of a unique selling point, that, you know, you're going into these stores and you're going to have this experience. However, and you've also got higher margins, obviously, if you're selling direct to the customer, but you could well be limiting your reach. And that's the thing to consider. So by using a concessionary service in there, you might be able to increase your volume, which will then compensate any decrease in margin that you might have. So again, you know, this could be a real opportunity for Tread Cushy, in the sense that they could have a more B2B relationship, so business to business, rather than what they've got at the moment, which is a business to consumer. Now, I'm not saying that the business to consumer direct would go, you know, that is their bread and butter, isn't it? That is what they pride themselves on. But there is a real opportunity in here to possibly get to that 1 million mark that they want to get to by 2025. And that could be through using concessions or intermediary businesses. Now, as it currently stands at the moment, because all of their consumers are just that, consumers, it's direct consumer, you're going to find that the vast majority of those sales are on a cash basis, because obviously, you know, they're paying cash for the goods at the point where the sale takes place. If there was a shift to a B2B, so business to business sort of relationship, that might change. So that adds on additional issues, if you think about it from the perspective of the fact that actually now you would be in a situation where, yes, you've got this nice new revenue stream, but that nice new revenue stream has also got additional costs which are attributable to it. Those additional costs attributable are in relation to things like credit, and offering credit to these business consumers, because let's be honest, that's what they would expect. So you need to make sure that you're not just thinking, yeah, we'll just go for that, that's fantastic. You've got to think about what the added costs and the added infrastructure. That's a good way of thinking about it. The added infrastructure that you're going to need to allow you to manage that. Okay, so just something to be mindful of. Moving on then, as we said, then we've got a number of retail stores already. We've got retail stores then in the capital city of Keeland in here. There's 8 other stores in major cities in Keeland, and there's a further 6 stores in the capital cities of 6 European countries. Again, just a lot more opportunity is what I would say in there. That is quite small in the scheme of things, and this organisation is one that obviously wants to expand their operations. Interestingly, what I thought about this is, well, what happens to these stores? You know, are these stores that we own? Are these stores that we lease? You know, what sort of agreements have we got in place? So yet again, IFRS 16, IAS 16 are coming into play in there. What you've then got is the information for June 2021 and how this is broken down. So you can see obviously there, Keeland, the majority of sales are taking place there, and we can see that the majority of those sales in Keeland are still online. And you can see that that's across the board actually. So Northern Europe, again, the majority of the sales are online. Southern Europe, we don't actually have any retail stores in there. Now what you can see, and again these are just little snapshots for you, you will need to revisit this. 76% of all of your sales are online in here. And remember, you've got 2 options with the online. You've got the online website, and you've also got the app as well. Don't forget that app. The other thing to note in here is 46% of overall sales are in Keeland as well. Interestingly, we've just flagged there the fact that Southern Europe doesn't have any retail stores. Opportunity possibly. Something that might be our next step, if you like. Again, revisit that. You know, I appreciate that that's a bit of a snapshot of what's going on. Just look at that, look at the percentages, look at the splits in terms of your revenue. Interestingly then, next part, sales are not uniformly distributed across the year. So as soon as you see that, you've got to think seasonal variations. If you're thinking about seasonal variations, what are you thinking about? You're thinking about time series analysis. So what we've got here is we've got peak sales, which are taking place in October to December, and then in the period April to June. So what you need to question is, well, why is that happening? It's happening because of the fact that there is new designs that are launched, and those are typically launched in March, which would correspond with April to June, and typically launched in September, which would correspond to October to December. Also as well, bear in mind that, you know, you do have the holiday period in many countries in December as well, so that might also have an impact for the seasonality in there, because they were given as gifts, for example. What we need to be mindful of in here then is, if we, for example, are thinking about opening a retail store in Southern Europe, what we need to take into consideration then is the impact of seasonal variations on the trend. So I'm thinking here that you could quite easily be provided with some time series information and being asked about, well, how is that useful if we decide to open a new store in Southern Europe, and things you would need to consider about stripping out the seasonality in relation to the data. Okay, there is a slight mention there about the app again. It was only launched in 2020, so we've probably not got that much information about that as yet. But what you've got to consider in here is anything that includes digitalisation in any way, shape or form. You need to think about big data. Okay. Big data, digital costing, really, really important. Moving on then, this range that we've got then, as you can imagine, because we're not putting all our eggs in one basket here, appeals to a broad range of customers across a big age range as well. So the demographic that we've got in there is quite far reaching. And the casual range that we've got is fast becoming one of the on-trend brands, which is quite interesting. So in terms of where we sort of position ourselves in the market, we are being perceived as being quite trendy. And now on that basis, on face value, that's great. You know, that's absolutely great. And we can see that this is driven by the fact that we've got these sustainable credentials in here. Just take a step back just for a minute. Trends change. Okay, so you know, we can't just sit there and think, well, we're on trend today, everything we do is on point and it's going to be the same tomorrow. So we need to make sure that we're not just going down that route, and we are still producing the athletic shoes that are used for performance as well. So it's all well and good being a trendy brand, but trends change depending upon the demographic of your consumers. So just be mindful of that. You know, that all of a sudden, you could be on point one day and then the next day some new member of the market comes along and takes that and whips that carpet from underneath you. So it's about making sure that you really monitor the performance there and that you really measure the success of that. The other thing that I find interesting, and I'm not surprised about actually, is there when it talks about prices. So your prices are above the market average. I am not surprised in the slightest about that. With reference to the market averages, we thought we'd be more expensive, didn't we? Because of the fact that we're using all of these sustainable materials in there, and the fact that we're using skilled craft people in here. Whenever you see skilled, whenever you see specialist, you know, you see pound signs in there. You know, we've got staff, our staff actually love us as an organisation. Again, that's because we treat them well. Probably they've got some additional perks that they get as employees, but our customers seem to want to pay it, which is fantastic. So they see the added value in the products that we're actually selling them, and I think that's quite important in here. So that's where our sort of positioning is. Is there anything that we can do in widening the net there? Is there anything that we can do to reduce our prices and maybe have a discount sneaker? I'm just thinking, you know, is there anything that we can do to possibly diversify that? Or are we happy to stay as that sort of elite product in there? And then finally, with reference to sales and marketing, the mix of sales then between your casual and performance is different in retail stores and online. The reason for this, and I think I've mentioned this already, is many customers prefer to come to the actual stores themselves for the expertise from the actual teams. And as it states there, this is predominantly for the performance shoes. The athletic shoes, that they've got the performance shoes. And the reason for this is that they're loyal to the brand, and they like the expertise, so the skilled sales staff that they get from this personal contact. Now, one of the things to know, and again, we won't get a chance to look at that today, but there is an article at the end of the pre-seen, which is based around the analysis of the foot and the gait and how we run and how we walk. It might be something that Tread Cushy actually bring to the forefront, and this is maybe something that they can add to their retail stores, for example. So that, I think, is absolutely key in here. Now, again, it goes back to what we've said before here. When they're talking about mix of sales, think variances, you know, because variances is an area that absolutely could be applicable here. Right then, so that's your sales performance. There's a lot going on there, so you know you will need to readdress that. You will need to revisit it. production facilities then, and so a bit about the production process in here. So we've got one single production facility. Fine, that's in Keeland. What we need to consider is whether or not that single production facility is sufficient for us as an organisation. If we want to expand, we're at 700,000 now. We want to expand in the next couple of years up to 1 million, I think it was by 2025. Can the current production facility manage that? I think that's the key thing. Or do we consider a new production facility, for example, in Northern Europe or Southern Europe or elsewhere? So there is something to think about in there. Because if you consider the fact that we're also going to have the logistics associated with that and the delivery of the materials and distribution of the goods, from a carbon footprint perspective, by 2030, remember, they want to be carbon neutral. That might be something that we need to consider. So given that we are seeing increases in demand in different locations, does it make sense to have some production for that particular location in that area? And again, think about the corporate and social responsibility in there. Think about bolstering the relationship that you have with the local community as well in those areas. So there's all those things to consider. In terms of the production facility then, it does say in here that it does currently include a number of different buildings in there. You know, you've got your raw material warehouse, you're going to have your sort of production lines and things like that. How have those been set up? You know, are we in a situation where those are leased, or are we in a situation where those are purchased outright? Again, you can see the same accounting standards coming up in there as well. Production, interestingly, we're advised that it comes, production is typically for inventory. This type of business would really struggle with just in time if you think about it from an inventory perspective. The only reason that I would stress that point is we might have certain times of the year where some of our materials are available to us that they might not be available at different times of the year. So we might have to, for example, bulk buy our wood, or we might have to bulk buy our wool. It makes sense, doesn't it, if you think about it? So we might have to produce to ensure that we don't have perishability in advance of when we sell them. That's fine. You know, that in itself is, you know, I'm not saying that's a problem necessarily. Wherein lies the problem, though, is that term that I used before, that we're on trend, we are trending, trends change. There is a bit of a risk here that if we are producing these products for inventory rather than to order, that we might have surplus products in here. So that's just something to be mindful of. So we could have products which become obsolete, and as an organisation who's really interested in sustainability, they would need to look at ways of reusing those materials, or they would need to look at ways of redistribution of those products, maybe to a different market. So not something that's necessarily been highlighted, but I'm thinking trendy, change. Okay, trends change, obsolescence possibly in reference to your inventory. The other thing to note as well is there's a lot of cash that is tied up in inventory. So again, just something to be mindful of. You've then got the production process then. It's not that complex really in the scheme of things. So what we've got at the get-go then, we've got the design and the prototype. With reference to design and prototype, you know, you're probably going to have, you know, an R&D team that's involved in that. So thinking about research and development in there, thinking about how we design our products, you know, what type of design process we would go through. You know, would we do market research, for example, and go direct to our consumer in there? In terms of the more sort of practical elements regarding production, so we've got the weaving, we've got the cutting, we've got the stitching, and we've got the moulding in there. There's a lot going on, and we've got the lasting at the bottom, which I'll explain in a second. there's lots of different processes involved in here. And I'm not sure, as it currently stands, as to what happens in terms of our overheads at each of those different stages. What this screams to me is that there's going to be a lot of overheads in there. And we might need to consider whether or not we make a bit of a shift to activity-based costing in here. Now, activity-based costing, don't get me wrong, it's not radical, but it is a costing technique which is, or which supersedes, if you like, just using total absorption costing. So from my perspective, this is something that you may need to consider. Now, when it comes down to activity-based costing, what you've got to remember is you do not just do activity-based costing for the sake of it. You've got to make sure that any sort of step towards activity-based costing is because it is cost beneficial. So again, you might need to question whether that would be appropriate. Now, the other thing that is very interesting to me, can you see that these go through stages? So you've got the weaving, you've got the cutting, you've then got the stitching, you've got the moulding of the shoe. We've got here possibilities for bottlenecks, haven't we? Yeah, we've got possibilities here for bottlenecks in the production process. We've therefore got theory of constraints in here. So in that sense, what do we do? How do we maximize the throughput in relation to each of these different sections? So for example, if your machinery went down in the cutting department, what would you choose in terms of which of your products would you develop at that point? So be mindful of theory of constraints and activity-based costing regarding production. You've then got the lasting and the finishing. Lasting cannot happen until everything else has taken place. So the moulding of the shoe and all of the stitching, etc. Again, what we've got there is the bottleneck. Just to explain what lasting is. Lasting is essentially the stretching of the products, and we'll see a picture of that in a second. So there's a lot going on. It's not complex by any stretch of the imagination. I've seen them a lot more complex than this, but you can see that there's a knock-on effect for each of those different processes. Okay, so design and prototype then in a bit more detail. Launch twice a year. We know that, March and September in there. With reference to this then, what we need to consider in here is, design and prototyping. Once this has been incurred, it's essentially a sunk cost. This is not a cost that can necessarily be sent on or passed on to our consumers directly, because the whole point in here is that these products may never actually go to market in that sense. One of the good things about this, though, is that they do use digitalized software in here, and the designs that they actually implement are rigorously tested in here. That's good because we pride ourselves on a high quality product, don't we? And we don't want to lose that. We don't want to get away from that. We want to maintain that. So I think the fact that it talks about rigorous testing is absolutely imperative in here. After then, the final design approval, any new moulding and cutting dies require for production are scored. Just so that you are aware, a cutting die, you'll get to know quite a few different terminologies in here, are stencils that are going to be used for the cutting process. We've then got the weaving of our fabric. Weaving is undertaken by machines. What does that mean? It's highly likely that the overheads in here will be absorbed on the basis of machine hours, because it's machine intensive as opposed to being labour intensive. Cutting is done by hand cutting or using digital laser cutting. It could be either or in there, or you might have two different types of overhead absorption rates. I think what I'm thinking here is there an opportunity to use more digital laser cutting? Is that a possibility in here? So possibly more automation with reference to cutting. Stitching then, stitching is done by skilled craftspeople. So therefore overheads are likely to be absorbed on the basis of labour hours. Do we need the skills craft people? Excuse me. It would appear so, as it currently stands. But again, do not underestimate automation here. Do not underestimate the fact that actually, you know, these skilled craft people could be used more in design, for example. Moulding, what we've got here is we've got an injection moulding process, so again, automated, and this is probably going to be overheads absorbed using machine hours. And then finally, we've got lasting. So this is the assembly side of things, and it would appear that again this is a bit of a mixture in here. So lasting machinery is set up. That's interesting. The shoes are put on there. It's then folded, and then all of the processes take place. Again, there is a mixture in here. It's using skilled craftspeople, and it's also using machinery. So again, we would need to consider which one would be appropriate in there. Now, again, I go back to what I said to you before. Activity-based costing is a real option in here. Overheads are going to be significant for this organisation, very significant for Treadcushy, and it might be something that you need to advise on. You know, should they move to an activity-based costing process? Okay, and then finally then we've got finishing. So finishing then, quality checks take place, likely to be labour intensive there. And notice as well, and I highlighted this, that you've got recycling of the cardboard in there as well. So that recycling or recycled cardboard, again, something that just goes with us in terms of our underpinning policies and processes. Okay, right. I think this is probably the last section that I'm going to be able to cover on today's session. But what we've then got is purchasing and suppliers. Raw materials then. So we've got yarn, natural rubber, and sugarcane composites. In terms of the yarn then, we've got two types of yarn that we use. One is made from wood and one is made from wool, as we know already. For each type of yarn, we've got a single supplier, and they're both in Keeland. All of it comes from natural resources, wouldn't expect anything other. That's a bit of an issue for me, if I'm brutally honest. I think you've got to be a bit careful where you've got a single supplier. Don't get me wrong, you know, you'll have a really good relationship with them, and you will no doubt get really good economies of scale, actually. You know, because of the fact that you're buying from them a lot of the same material. But what you're doing there is you're putting yourself at risk, because what if one of those suppliers has an issue with the yarn that they're producing and selling to you? You're then in a position where instantly half of your production goes. So for me, I would be a little bit concerned about having just one supplier, and I would probably think about how I can mitigate that risk and possibly think about getting a secondary supplier in there just in case. Natural rubber then, this comes from a number of different suppliers, so we don't have the issue that we potentially have with yarn there. However, these are in Asia and South America, but it stands to reason because it's natural rubber if you think about it. And I think I mentioned this previously. These are a long distance away. We're looking at being carbon neutral by 2030 in here, so we might need to consider possible alternatives in here. However, one good thing is that, you know, the natural rubber suppliers are members of the World Federation Alliance of Sustainable Sourcing, so we know that this is coming from a good supplier or good suppliers in here. It's highly likely, though, here that we will also need to keep some buffer inventory because the lead times are going to be quite long. Not the case with the yarn as much. Yeah, I wouldn't say so there, but definitely with the natural rubber, your lead time is going to be longer, so you might need to keep quite a big buffer stock as such. And then you've got your sugarcane composite. So this comes from, again, South America. We have got a sole supplier, again, good relationships, but we have the problems associated with that. So again, make sure that you're being a bit skeptical about this. And I think that's a really important skill, actually, particularly for the case study units. You've got to question what you've been told and not just take it on face value and go, oh, they're going to have wonderful relationships. There is a however in relation to those. So do try and think about both sides of the coin when it comes to those. Okay, now on top of that, then we've also got some additional supplies in here based in Keyland, again, as it states there, bolstering the local credentials and the relationship that we've got with the local economy in there. And you can see what those are. In terms of the approach that's taken, then it's quite conservative to raw material and inventory management. What they do is they take advantage of bulk buying discounts wherever they're available. And the payment terms that they've got tend to be between 30 and 60 days. You need to check that. You need to check that the payment terms are in line with that 30 to 60 days. If it's more, then we could be in a situation where we are upsetting our suppliers. We don't want to do that, particularly for those single suppliers that we've got. Relevant costing is also appropriate in here, because if we're turning over this inventory on an ongoing basis, we really do need to consider what the relevant costs would be associated with it. But also from an F1 perspective, we need to consider how we value this inventory. You know, is it first in, first out? Is it AVCO that we're using in here? So we need to consider that. We must make sure that we are looking at what the payable days are in comparison to those days that have been set. You know, we do not want to upset our suppliers, but we also don't want to be paid too early, because it would have an adverse effect on our cash cycle in there. From an E1 perspective, then, material requirement planning in there. So MRP, are we using it? What sort of planning process do we have in place? Look, it says they take a conservative approach in here. They take advantage of bulk buying discounts. Is there any sort of surplus inventory? Is there any inventory that we need to dispose of, for example, that might be wasted in these situations? Okay. Right, I think that's probably quite a nice place. It seems like a clean break in the scheme of things. So that is, you know, essentially halfway through your pre-seen in there. I am hoping that that has given you a little bit of insight in reference to the pre-seen there. I just want to check then, guys, is there any questions there? Okay, bear with me 1 second, guys. I'm having a bit of trouble just getting my share back up. Sorry about this, chaps. Having a few problems with Zoom. Sorry about this, guys. Let me just make sure. Bear with me, chaps. There should be no problem with this. Can't seem to come out of sharing my screen. Right then, guys. Right, I think we are there. Sorry about that, chaps. I had a few problems there just with sharing my screen there. Sorry about that. So hopefully now you can just see me up on the screen there. Hopefully you found that quite useful on today's session, and particularly for those of you that haven't necessarily seen a case study before. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to run through and just have a look at the questions which I've got in here, and I'll just, if you can just bear with me, I'll have a look at those. In terms of, Edwin, I've got your point there just regarding sharing the pre-seen documents. As Thomas mentioned previously, the pre-seen documents with my annotations are available for those people that are booked onto the Viva courses in there. So Edwin, if you are booked onto one of our courses, then you will get access to those. Yeah, so it's absolutely available to Viva customers, absolutely. In terms of the recording for the session, the recordings for the session will be made available, and those recordings are made available, from what I gather, with normally the next day, but just being realistic with reference to these, those would probably be made available on Monday at the very latest in there. Okay, so thank you for that. Vivian, I'm glad that you enjoyed the session. So good, that's wonderful. Thank you, Edwin. Thanks, Ibrahim. When will we proceed with the other slides? Really good question there, Qualiza. We will be proceeding with those slides on the Viva course on Monday evening session, UK time 7 p.m. for those people that are booked onto the course. Osbert, oh, thank you. Yeah, so for unpacking it, good. I'm glad that you enjoyed that session. Good, Anna, feeling a bit more comfortable about it. It's actually a great case study, this one. It's a really quite a nice case study for you to be working with. Okay, is there any questions specifically then regarding the areas that we looked at on today's session that you might need some additional guidance with? Always like to have, you know, an extra 15 minutes at the end of the session there, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Is there any sort of questions there? Please use the chat panel if you've got any questions. Rachel, you're feeling less stressed. Okay, that's part of the battle. It really is. And I think a lot of people see this exam as being very, very different. And don't get me wrong, it is different. But the thing I would say with reference to this is I would say that you will get to the point of loving this exam, because it's not learn and churn. Okay, it's not learn and churn at all. It's about application. Okay, and as you go through these, you will be able to look at questions and think about how you can apply the scenario that you've been faced with there to the outcome. So yeah, ultimately, you know, it's all about the application. I can absolutely assure you that you will get to the point where you're loving case study. It's one of the best exams, I think, out there. So I'm glad you're feeling less stressed, Rachel. Sangeeta's asked, do I need to quote the names of the directors in the exam? Do you know what, Sangeeta? The way that the tasks are set up, as you'll see, you know, if you are on the future courses, on the future sessions, you'll actually see that they are very clear as to who you are directing your responses to. So they will always advise you in there that this email has come from, you know, Maria, or whatever the situation might be. So in that sense, Sangeeta, you will always know who your audience is. And actually by then you'll be so familiar with the terms. And I think you always put down their job title as well, Sangeeta. So that's quite useful. Okay, thanks, Edward, much appreciated. Interesting. How many hours a week would you study with the webinars? Anna, what you'll find is once you become really comfortable with the pre-seen material, and you will do, because you're going to have to look through this quite a few times to get comfortable with it. But what you'll find is that actually it's the application and the question practice. So, you know, we've given you a few insights in here as to the areas that you need to focus on. So from a study perspective, if you are a little bit rusty, for example, on activity-based costing, then you will need to ensure that you understand activity-based costing, but not doing the numbers. So it'll be more about the application of that and interpreting the information. So I know it's very difficult to say specifically how long you should be spending, but you would be looking at the webinars, but also outside of that time, question practice. And I cannot stress enough how wonderful for this exam the mocks are. Gosh, the feedback that you get on the mocks is second to none. So actually, you know, from my perspective, it's all about question practice. Yeah, so question practice, I know, is going to be absolutely key. Vulgar, so having online sales ultimately turning receivables into cash or feeding working capital. Yeah, absolutely. And Vulgar, one thing we've got to be really careful about is if we're moving to a B2B environment, think about the implications of that. Yeah, so B2B environment, business to business environment, you're going to end up, receivables are going to go up. No receivables or very few receivables at the moment. So you've got to think about the working capital cycle there. You've also got to think as well about the fact that that's going to have an impact on your inventory management and the availability of inventory as well. So you're absolutely right, Vulgar. You're going to find that the working capital cycle will switch. And as long as we can maintain that, then that's fine. We don't have an issue with it, but that will be an issue possibly that we need to consider. Lovely, thanks, Vivian. Yeah, so Edwin, in terms of activity-based costing in here, so what we have is we have a number of different processes, don't we? And those processes will be driven by different things. When we think about activity-based costing, what we're looking at is the reason why a cost is being incurred. So let me just give you the example of the finishing. So the finishing stage of the production process, what we do is quality inspections. So we inspect the quality of the athletic sneakers that have been produced. Now, what you've got to think is, well, what are the costs associated with that? So it could be the cost of somebody's time to undertake the actual quality inspection checks. But what you've got to think is, well, why are those costs being incurred? Well, they're being incurred because of the number of quality checks that take place. So Edwin, in that situation, what we're doing is we're looking at why the reason for the cost is there. You know, what causes it? What extra effort is required? So for example, in the stitching, it'll be the amount of stitching that takes place. And you may find that, you know, that's more for your performance shoes than what it is for your recreational shoes, for example. So yeah, Edwin, it's about looking at the real driver, the real reason why a cost is being incurred. Hopefully that answers your question there, Edwin. Osbert's asked, Kelly, I did my E1 and F1 syllabus in 2015. How do I get up to speed with big data and digital topics? Really good point. I think the first thing to do, Osbert, is make sure that you get access to the new syllabus. On the CIMA website, they do have what they refer to as a blueprint. And that blueprint and it's actually recently been updated, that blueprint does indicate what the syllabus content is now, and it will tell you where things have gone from the syllabus. So for example, you'll be pleased to know, Osbert, that from F1, groups have gone. Yeah, so there's no group financial reporting anymore because that's moved into F2. So there is some ticks here, Osbert. So groups have completely gone from F1. But we have now got the new accounting standard relating to leases. So have a look on CIMA Global. Make sure you get access to the CIMA blueprint, and that CIMA blueprint will tell you where there's changes from one syllabus to the other. And that would be where I would suggest, Osbert, that you start. Okay, so that's what I would suggest. Sorry, Nicola, you're in exactly the same boat as well. So the starting point is to see where your gaps are. And as I said, if you have got the access, the online access for Viva, in that situation, if you have got the online access, then obviously you will be able to find those differences and be able to pick those up. Bacanias asks, how would artificial intelligence be applicable to this case? Artificial intelligence, I'm thinking chatbots. Yeah, so online chat bots, which are automated as opposed to having the human interaction would be a good example there, Bakanya. So that's what I would suggest in there. So online chatbots, artificial intelligence, you could, and I'm talking extreme now, you could even have robots when you enter in the stores. But AI, I think more of the online environment, I think would be something interesting. Don't underestimate the fact that actually as well, you know, we're using things like, you know, Fitbits and things like that, watches and so on at the moment. There could be an opportunity in here to put something in the shoe, and that's actually mentioned in one of the articles later on. Specific KPIs, Rachel, with reference to KPIs, it depends on the scenario. KPIs will always be examined, but you've got to think about the scenario that you're faced with. So with reference to KPIs, key performance indicators, what we are considering is things like financial KPIs, but also non-financial KPIs as well. So we're looking at things like customer satisfaction, for example, that you might need to take into consideration, but also thinking about suppliers. You might need to consider things like what your service level agreement is and what your key performance indicators are to make sure that your suppliers are meeting their obligations as well. So Rachel, KPI is quite a big area, which we will be covering on future sessions. Okay, Osbert, do we need to look at doing a SWOT? I would always recommend it. I think that's a fabulous idea. It will give you some insight into the organisation, into the business itself. So look at the strengths, look at the weaknesses, look at the opportunities, look at the threats. It is always something I recommend with every single case study. So Edwin's asked there, so with E1, what are the sort of OCS favourites so far? It is a lot to do with digitalisation, and also looking at sort of leadership in terms of taking the organisation forward is key. They do like marketing, and they like marketing mix, and we see that quite often. But the key thing to remember, Edwin, is anything is sort of fair game. So what we do through the course is we try and pinpoint some of those key areas for you. Okay. Right then, guys, is there any other questions there? Sangeeta's asked a really good question. Would corporate governance be examined here? It absolutely could be, but very light touch is what I would say. And the only reason I'm saying that is because corporate governance is very much strategically driven. So corporate governance, you're going to see more in your management case study and your strategic case study. Okay, so Sangeeta, I hope that answers your question. Okay, Vilga, I completely agree with you in terms of activity-based costing. It's a really hot topic, actually, a really hot topic. I think one of the key things you've got to remember in here is, remember, you're not going to be making the decision about whether an organisation actually uses activity-based costing. That's outside your pay grade in here. What you're going to be asked is what your opinion is on activity-based costing. You know, can it be useful? Is it useful? What are the pros? What are the cons associated with using that process? So you're not going to have to make that decision. Remember, your role is supporting the decision-making process. So what you will have to say is whether or not it is likely to be appropriate for the organisation. Okay. Right then, guys. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thoroughly enjoyed my Saturday morning session with you today. You've got all of the contact details if you do require any additional information. And I do hope that I do get to see you in your future studies. I've got a couple of questions just to finish off. So what do you look for while practicing with past papers? I always think with the past papers, what you've got to think is how realistic it is and how comparable it is. So with the past papers, do make sure that you're looking for a business which is an operation, which is a retail operation and an online operation. For example, the service sector here wouldn't really be as appropriate. So last time's case study was based around car rental. Car rental is not really as comparable in this particular case study. So I would say look out for similar organisations. I've also been asked, will we have to calculate anything on the spot in the exam? It's highly unlikely, actually. It's highly likely that you will be in a situation where you are given the numbers and you have to interpret them, which is always quite nice. Okay, brilliant. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And as I said, I do hope that I do see you on your future Viva courses. Good question, Sangeeta. Do I need to memorize percentages? Absolutely not. Okay, absolutely not. If there is anything that they need you to know, that will be provided to you. So please do not, again, please do not try and memorize all your percentages in there. What I would say though, Sangeeta, is make sure that you understand where the business is operationally. So make sure that you understand the gross profit margin, make sure you understand the net profit margin, make sure that you understand working capital, but you definitely do not need to memorize those percentages. Absolutely, Sangeeta. I put them in there to get a feel. Yes, to get a feel for the situation as opposed to trying to remember them. But yeah, just get a feel for the business, and I think that's probably the best bet. Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm glad you've enjoyed it. And as I said, I look forward to hopefully seeing you in your future studies with Viva. I'm not sure whether Thomas has got anything to add at the end of today's session. However, as I said, it has been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you again. Hope you found that you got some snippets of information from that. All right then, guys, thank you ever so much. Take care. See you soon.